I always kept the peace with my manipulative mother-in-law, but at her extravagant 60th birthday, I finally snapped, exposing years of deceit and ending our family ties in front of everyone. The champagne flute felt cold and heavy in my hand, a perfect anchor in the swirling sea of pastel dresses and stuffy tuxedos. My mother-in-law, Carol, had outdone herself. For her 60th birthday, she hadn't just thrown a party, she had staged a full-blown gala. We were in a ridiculously expensive rented ballroom overlooking the city, complete with a five-piece band, towers of seafood, and an ice sculpture of a swan that was slowly weeping onto a silver platter. The only thing missing, the one crucial element whose absence was a gaping hole in the center of the festivities, was my wife, Sarah, her daughter. Carol glided towards me, a vision in shimmering gold lame, her smile as wide and brittle as a pane of sugar glass. "Alex, darling," she cooed, loud enough for the cluster of her friends nearby to hear. "So glad you could make it. But where on earth is that delinquent daughter of mine? Did her car break down on the way to the bank?" Her friends tittered politely. I forced a smile that felt like it was cracking my face. "She wasn't feeling well, Carol. She sends her love and her deepest apologies." It was a lie, of course. A thin, pathetic shield against the storm I knew was brewing. Sarah was feeling perfectly fine, physically at least. She was at home, probably curled up with a book and a glass of wine, having reached her absolute breaking point with her mother 3 days ago. My mind flashed back to the argument, the one that had left our kitchen feeling like a war zone. "She's added a string quartet, Alex," Sarah had hissed, waving her phone in my face. The screen showed a new, itemized invoice Carol had forwarded with the subject line, "Final touches." "A string quartet. We said we'd help with a hall rental, Alex. We offered to help, not to fund her coronation." I had tried to be the peacemaker, the dutiful son-in-law. "Honey, it's her 60th. It's a huge milestone. We can stretch a little." That was the wrong thing to say. Sarah's eyes, usually so warm and full of light, turned to flint. "Stretch? Alex, she's not asking us to stretch. She's expecting us to bankrupt ourselves for her ego. First it was the venue. Then the caterer wasn't good enough. She needed the one that did the mayor's inauguration. Then the open bar, the custom floral arrangements, and now a string quartet to play Vivaldi while her friends gossip about who's had the most plastic surgery. She does this every single time. She sees our kindness as a blank check." She was right, of course. She was completely, infuriatingly right. Carol had a way of taking an inch and turning it into a transcontinental marathon. We'd offered to pay for the venue as our gift, a generous offer by any standard. But in Carol's mind, that had morphed into us being the official sponsors of the entire gold-plated affair. Every time we tried to gently apply the brakes, she'd get teary-eyed and talk about how this was her last big celebration and how she just wanted one perfect night to remember. The fight had ended with Sarah throwing her hands up in defeat. "I'm not going," she had declared, her voice dangerously quiet. "I am not going to stand there smiling, while she parades us around like her personal ATMs. I am done, Alex. If you want to go and play the part of the devoted son-in-law, you go. But I'm drawing a line." And so, here I was, alone, trying to run interference. For 2 hours, I'd been fielding the same question from relatives and friends. "Where's Sarah?" I'd perfected the vague, concerned husband response. "Just a nasty bug. She's so disappointed to miss this." Each time I said it, Carol would materialize nearby, sighing dramatically. My poor, delicate Sarah. She's always been so fragile. It was a masterclass in passive aggression. She was painting Sarah as both a flake and a sickly weakling, all while playing the part of the concerned mother. The evening wore on. I made small talk. I praised the grotesque swan. I told Carol she didn't look a day over 40. I was a walking, talking embodiment of keeping the peace. But I could feel the tension ratcheting up. The band was packing up, and the waiters were clearing the last of the dessert plates. The party was winding down. I saw the venue manager, a man with a clipboard and a permanently worried expression, approach Carol. They spoke in hushed tones for a moment. I watched as Carol's posture stiffened. Her sugar glass smile didn't just crack, it shattered. She turned away from the manager, her eyes scanning the thinning crowd until they locked onto me. There was no warmth in them now, only cold, hard fury. She started walking towards me, her gold dress rustling like angry foil. The few remaining guests fell silent, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. The air grew thick and heavy. It was like watching a shark move through the water, all sleek, predatory focus. She stopped a few feet in front of me, her chest heaving slightly. Her voice when she spoke wasn't a coo or a whisper. It was a low, guttural prelude to an explosion, a sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. "Alex," she said, her voice trembling with rage. She held up the invoice from the manager, shaking it in her hand. The paper trembled. "We have a problem." She took a deep breath, and her next words were no longer a private conversation. She bellowed them, a full-throated, party-stopping scream that echoed off the high ceilings and silenced every last whisper of conversation. "Where's your wife? And who is going to pay for all of this?" The ballroom, which seconds before had been filled with the low hum of polite goodbyes, fell into a cavernous silence. Every single head turned towards us. I could feel dozens of pairs of eyes boring into me, a physical weight of judgment and curiosity. An elderly cousin of Carol's dropped her clutch bag, and the clatter of its golden clasp hitting the marble floor sounded like a gunshot. My entire body went rigid. The blood pounded in my ears, a frantic drumbeat against the dead quiet. For a split second, I wished the floor would swallow me whole. Carol stood there, breathing hard, her face a mask of theatrical outrage. She was performing, and I was her unwilling co-star in this humiliating play. "Did you all hear that?" she asked the room, her voice trembling with practiced fragility. "My son-in-law won't answer me. My own daughter abandons me on my 60th birthday and leaves me with this." She shook the invoice in her hand again, the paper crinkling angrily. "She promised me, you know." She said, "Mom, don't you worry about a thing. It's your special night. We'll take care of it all." And now look, she's not even here to face the music. The lie was so blatant, so audacious, it nearly knocked the wind out of me. We had offered to help. We had never, not in a million years, promised to take care of it all. But in Carol's narrative, she was the damsel in distress, and Sarah and I were the villains who had tied her to the railroad tracks. A wave of hot anger washed over me, momentarily eclipsing the shame. Anger at Carol for her bottomless manipulation, and a flicker of anger at Sarah for leaving me here to face the dragon alone. "Carol," I said, my voice low and strained. I took a step towards her, trying to create a bubble of privacy that wasn't there. "Please, let's not do this here. We can go to the manager's office and sort this out." "Sort it out?" she screeched, snatching her arm away as I reached for it. "There's nothing to sort out, Alex. There is a bill that needs to be paid. Or do you expect me to wash dishes?" Some of her friends gasped in performative horror. The venue manager, a man who looked like he'd rather be wrestling an alligator, cleared his throat. "Ma'am, Mr. Davies, if we could just step into my office, the final balance is due upon conclusion of the event, as per our agreement." His voice was professionally calm, but his eyes darted around nervously, taking in his captive audience. Carol ignored him. Her focus was entirely on me. "My daughter has made a fool of me," she seethed, her voice dropping to a venomous hiss that was somehow more chilling than her screaming. "She has humiliated me in front of all my friends and family. The least you can do, the very least, is honor her commitment and pay the people who made this night possible." My jaw was clenched so tight I thought my teeth might crack. Honor her commitment. The commitment she had invented, and we had explicitly pushed back on for weeks. I finally looked at the piece of paper in her hand. "Let me see it," I said, my voice flat. For a moment, I thought she'd refuse, but a flicker of triumph crossed her face. She practically shoved the invoice into my chest. "See for yourself," she sneered. "See the cost of your wife's disrespect." My hands were shaking slightly as I took it. I smoothed the paper out, my eyes scanning the horrifying list of charges. The venue fee, the catering for 150 guests at an eye-watering price per head, the premium open bar tab that could fund a small nation, the Parisian florist, the 5-piece band, the damned string quartet. The numbers blurred together, forming a total at the bottom that made my stomach plummet. It was more than double what we had mentally budgeted for, a catastrophic sum that would decimate our savings. We'd be paying this off for years. I felt sick. We were in so much trouble. All because we tried to do something nice, and Carol twisted it into this grotesque monument to her own ego. I was about to fold the paper to admit defeat, to tell the manager we'd figure something out, when my eyes caught another line item below the final total. It was under a separate heading: Future Bookings and Deposits. My heart stopped. It read, Anniversary Gala Deposit, Venue and Catering Prepayment, Non-refundable. The event date was listed for 2 years from now. The client name was listed as Sarah and Alex Davies, 10th anniversary. The deposit amount alone was 5 figures. My vision tunneled. The sounds of the room, the whispering guests, Carol's heavy breathing, it all faded into a dull roar. She hadn't just ambushed me with the bill for her own party. She had taken our credit card information, the one we'd used to put the initial agreed-upon deposit on the hall, and used it to unilaterally book and prepay for a lavish party for ES. A party we never discussed, never wanted, and certainly never approved. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a calculated, deliberate act of financial violation. It was a power play of breathtaking arrogance. I slowly lifted my eyes from the invoice and looked at my mother-in-law. The furious, wronged woman act had vanished from her face. In its place was a look of smug, unadulterated triumph. She knew I'd seen it. She was waiting for my reaction, daring me to challenge her. She thought she had me trapped. She thought that, faced with such a public spectacle, I would do what I always did: cave in, smooth things over, and pay up to make the problem go away. But as I stared at that non-refundable deposit, something inside me didn't just crack. It shattered into a million pieces, and what was left behind was cold, hard, and utterly finished. I slowly, deliberately folded the invoice in half, then in half again, the creases sharp and final. I didn't look at the manager or the gaping guests. I looked directly into Carol's expectant eyes. The peacekeeper was gone. The dutiful son-in-law had left the building. I took a deep breath, and with a quiet calm that seemed to suck all the air out of the room, I said one single solitary word. No. The word hung in the air, small and sharp and impossibly loud in the dead silence. It was a pebble tossed into a still pond, and the ripples of shock spread instantly across the faces of everyone in the room. Carol's smug expression faltered, her perfectly painted lips parting in disbelief. She blinked, as if she couldn't possibly have heard me correctly. What did you say?" she stammered, her voice dropping the theatricality and taking on a genuine edge of confusion and fury. I met her gaze without flinching. I said no. We are not paying for this. I held up the folded invoice between my thumb and forefinger, as if it were a contaminated object. We are not paying for your party, and we are certainly not paying for this anniversary gala you took the liberty of booking on our behalf without our knowledge or consent. I turned to the venue manager, whose face had gone from worried to ashen. I apologize for this scene, I said, my voice steady and clear. My wife and I agreed to pay the initial deposit for the hall rental as a gift. That was the extent of our financial commitment. Any and all additional expenses, including this fraudulent future booking, were authorized solely by Mrs. Fletcher. The liability is hers, and hers alone. You'll have to take it up with her. A collective gasp went through the remaining guests. This was no longer just an awkward family squabble. I had just publicly and unequivocally thrown my mother-in-law under a bus laden with debt. Carol's face cycled through a series of emotions: shock, indignation, and then pure, unadulterated rage. Her skin, already flushed from the champagne, turned a blotchy, furious red. "How dare you?" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "You stand there and lie in front of all our friends and family. Sarah promised me. She would be horrified to hear you speaking this way, refusing to honor her word." "Would she?" I shot back, a cold fury I didn't know I possessed rising in my chest. "Sarah is horrified, Carol. She's horrified that her mother's love is so transactional. She's horrified that you took our generosity and used it as a weapon against us. The reason she isn't here tonight isn't because she's sick. It's because she is sick of this. She is sick of you manipulating us, guilt-tripping us, and treating our marriage like your own personal line of credit. She's at home because she knew you would pull something like this, and for the first time in her life, she refused to be a part of it. Every word was a nail in the coffin of our relationship. I knew it as I said it. There was no coming back from this. The polite fiction I had maintained for years, the carefully constructed facade of the happy, accommodating son-in-law, was being demolished by my own hands, brick by brick. A part of me was terrified, but a much larger part felt a strange, exhilarating sense of liberation. One of Carol's friends, a woman named Janice, dripping in diamonds, stepped forward. "Alex, dear," she said in a condescending purr. "There must be some misunderstanding. Carol was just so excited. Surely you and Sarah can sort this out. Think of your family." "I am thinking of my family," I said, turning to face her. "My family is my wife, and what her mother has done here is not a misunderstanding. It's theft. She used our credit card information, without authorization, to make a 5-figure deposit on an event we never agreed to. In my book, that's called fraud." The word fraud ricocheted around the ballroom. The manager flinched visibly. This had escalated far beyond an unpaid bill. Carol looked like I had physically struck her. She clutched her chest, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. "You wouldn't," she whispered, her voice a ragged thread. "You wouldn't do this to me, after everything I've done for you, for Sarah. What you've done is try to saddle us with a debt that would cripple us financially, all for the sake of your own vanity," I said, my voice dropping. "And you did it behind our backs. So, yes, I would. And I will." I turned back to the manager. "I need you to print out a record of all transactions associated with my wife's credit card, the initial deposit for the hall, which we will honor, and any subsequent charges, including the fraudulent deposit for the anniversary gala." I pulled my phone from my pocket. "I will be disputing these charges with our credit card company immediately. I also suggest you secure payment from Mrs. Fletcher tonight, because as of this moment, we are washing our hands of this entire affair." The manager, finally spurred into action by the threat of a massive chargeback, nodded quickly and scurried away towards his office. Carol just stood there, stunned into silence, the fury on her face replaced by a dawning horror. She was realizing I was serious. The blank check was canceled, the ATM was out of service, and the bill for her extravagant fantasy had just landed squarely in her lap. I felt a hand on my arm. It was my father-in-law, Tom, Carol's husband. He had been a silent observer throughout the entire implosion, standing by the now empty seafood tower with a glass of scotch, his face impassive. He was a quiet, perpetually weary man who had long ago adopted a strategy of non-engagement to survive his marriage. "Alex," he said, his voice quiet but firm, "let it be for tonight, son. We'll sort it out in the morning." I looked at him, at the tired lines around his eyes. "There's nothing to sort out, Tom. She went too far." "I know," he said, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something other than resignation in his eyes. It looked almost like respect. "Just, let's not make it worse." Before I could answer, the manager returned, holding 2 sheets of paper. He handed one to me and one to Carol, who took it with a trembling hand. "This is the itemized final bill, Mrs. Fletcher," he said, his voice all business now. "And Mr. Davies, this is the transaction history you requested from your card." I glanced at my sheet, confirming the unauthorized charges. Carol stared at hers, the massive total at the bottom seeming to physically stun her. Her bravado was gone, replaced by a pale, panicked desperation. She looked up at me, her eyes pleading. "Alex, please." But I just shook my head. I had nothing left to say to her. I turned to Tom. "I'm sorry it came to this," I said, and I meant it. Then I turned my back on my mother-in-law and the smoldering ruins of her party, and I started walking towards the exit. I was halfway across the marble floor, the silence of the room a heavy cloak on my shoulders, when Carol's voice, shrill and panicked, cut through the air one last time. "Wait, Tom. Tom, do something. Tell him. Tell him about the house." I stopped dead in my tracks, my hand hovering over the ornate brass handle of the ballroom door. The house? I turned slowly, my heart starting a new, heavy rhythm in my chest. What on earth did our house have to do with this? We'd bought it ourselves, with a down payment we had painstakingly saved for years. Her name wasn't on the mortgage, the deed, or anything else. Carol's face was a mess of desperation and malicious triumph. She had one last card to play, and she was flinging it onto the table with the wild abandon of a ruined gambler. "That's right, the house," she cried, a hysterical edge to her voice. "Tom, tell him. Tell him where the rest of his precious down payment came from." I looked at Tom, my father-in-law. The weary resignation was back in his eyes, but it was mixed with a deep, profound shame. He wouldn't meet my gaze. He just stared into his scotch as if it held all the answers to the universe. "What is she talking about?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. Carol didn't let him answer. She practically spat the words at me. "5 years ago, when you two were scraping together every penny for that down payment, you came up short, remember? You were $20,000 short of what you needed to avoid the extra mortgage insurance. And then, oh so magically, a check appeared. A bonus from your father's company, you said. A surprise inheritance." Her lips curled into a sneer. "There was no bonus, Alex. There was no inheritance. It was me. I gave the money to your father to give to you. I saved you from throwing money away every month. I made that house possible." The air left my lungs in a rush. It was true. We had been agonizingly close to our goal, and then my dad had called, ecstatic, telling me his company had awarded him a surprise legacy bonus that he wanted to gift to us. It was the final piece of the puzzle, the miracle that got us over the finish line. I had never questioned it. Why would I? To think that it was all a lie, a carefully constructed manipulation from Carol. It made my skin crawl. "You're lying," I said, but the words sounded weak even to my own ears. "Am I?" Carol challenged, her confidence surging back. "Ask Tom. Ask your own father. I funneled that money through him so your precious pride wouldn't be wounded by accepting a handout from me. That $20,000 was a gift of love, a foundation for your future. And this is how you repay me? By humiliating me and refusing to help me in my time of need?" She thought she had me. This was her checkmate. In her mind, she had just revealed a debt so profound, so foundational, that it invalidated all my anger. I was a hypocrite, standing in judgment of her while living in a house she had secured for me. I should have felt trapped, ashamed, obligated. But instead, all I felt was a clarifying, chilling rage. "So that's what this is," I said, my voice low. "That wasn't a gift. It was an investment. You weren't helping us, you were purchasing leverage. You bought a $20,000 key to our lives that you could use whenever you wanted. You've been holding it over our heads for 5 years, waiting for the perfect moment to twist it." I started walking back towards her, my steps measured and deliberate. The remaining guests shuffled back, creating a wider circle around us. "You didn't just lie to me and Sarah," I continued, stopping a few feet from her. "You implicated my own father in your deception. You used his love for me as a tool for your manipulation. You didn't just buy leverage over me, you tried to poison the most honest relationship in my life." I pulled out my phone. My fingers flew across the screen. I opened my banking app, my movements precise and angry. "You want to be repaid, Carol? Fine. Let's settle our debts. All of them." I navigated to the transfer screen. The ballroom was so quiet I could hear the frantic tapping of my thumbs on the glass. "There," I said, holding up the phone so she could see the screen. $20,000, sent to your account, effective immediately. Consider your investment returned, with my sincerest thanks for revealing its true nature. We are now even. The gift is repaid. The leverage is gone. Your key to our life no longer works." Carol stared at the screen, her mouth agape. This was not the reaction she had expected. She had wanted groveling, apologies, capitulation. She had not expected me to call her bluff and sever the tie so completely, so publicly, so financially. The blood drained from her face, leaving her looking old and brittle under the ballroom lights. I lowered my phone. "As for the rest of this," I said, gesturing to the invoice in her hand, "that is still your problem. You wanted a party to show everyone how successful and generous your family is? Well, here's your chance to show them. Pay your own bills." I turned to Tom. He finally looked up at me, his eyes filled with a complicated mix of regret and something that looked like awe. "I'm sorry, Tom," I said more gently this time. "I'm going home to my wife." And with that, I turned and walked out of the ballroom for the final time. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel the weight of their stares, the silent, stunned aftermath of the bomb I had just detonated. The cool night air felt incredible on my face. As I walked to my car, I called Sarah. She answered on the first ring. "Alex, what happened? I was getting worried." "I'm on my way home," I said, my voice shaking slightly with the adrenaline dump. "But we need to talk, and you need to call my dad." I gave her the short, brutal version of events. The screaming, the invoice, the fraudulent deposit, the revelation about the down payment, and the $20,000 transfer. She was silent for a long moment, and I could picture her processing the sheer scale of her mother's treachery. When she finally spoke, her voice was clear and firm, with no trace of sadness or regret. "Good," she said. "You did the right thing. I'm proud of you. Just come home." I drove home through the sleeping city, the streetlights blurring past. I felt strangely light. The years of placating, of compromising, of swallowing my anger to keep the peace had ended tonight. It was a messy, ugly, public ending, but it was an ending nonetheless. We'd have to deal with the fallout, the furious calls, the family drama, the financial hit of that 20 grand. But for the first time, it felt manageable, because we would be dealing with it together on our own terms, with no more hidden strings attached. We were free. When I walked through our front door into the warm light of our home, Sarah was waiting for me. She wrapped her arms around me, and as I held her, I knew with absolute certainty that we had finally paid the price for our peace. And it was worth every single penny.